Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C, and today is a beautiful March the 18th, 2016. And I tell you, we talk sports worldwide, but we can't do it without the help of our sponsors. And this segment is sponsored by Cadillac. Go see your Northern California Cadillac dealer, home of the Escalade. You can only get it new at your NorCal Escalade dealers. Tell them that Charlton and Big C sent you. And Big C, I know we love talking sports, and we started the program about 3.5 weeks ago. We talked about the Oscars with Chris Rock and how so many things relate to race. And we talk about how Hollywood actually mirrors sports. And when you think about Hollywood and sports, Big C, one of the greatest actors that you always see at a sporting event is Jack Nicholson. We talked about him in The Shining. He's been a great actor. For 60 years, he's been lighting up the screens, Big C. What are your thoughts on Jack?
Jack Nicholson is an icon at Laker games, Charlton. For decades, he's been courtside sitting next to the scorer's table.
Yeah.
But Jack has had so many dominating roles. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I mean, you can go back to a comic role where he played the Joker in the Batman series that, was released back into the movie theaters and did a great role at doing that. But Jack has just been a staple, whether it's been a military film, whether it's been a real-life film. Jack has been there. He has such a broad spectrum as an actor. And when you talk about the Lakers, Charlton, we even have former Lakers that have crossed over into that area. The great Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Charlton, played in Airplane.
Yeah.
He also played in Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee, where he fought Bruce Lee in that movie. You talked about Rick Fox last night when he played with Ray Allen, and He's Got Game in that college recruiting movie.
Yeah, Spike Lee produced it.
When you go back and you look at these guys, it's been so many of them. We talked about months ago, Woody Strode, who had played college football with Jackie Robinson at UCLA and crossed over into the acting field. He played in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yep.
He played in The Man Who Shot Liberty Balance with John Wayne and Lee Marvin. He also played in Spartacus with Charlton Heston, Charlton.
Well, I love the name Charlton, and when you think of Charlton Heston, I believe he played Moses in the Ten Commandments. But you think
that's Moses. He'll always be known as Moses.
Hey, you got to make sure when Moses talks, people listen. But also, one of the great actors out there as well, and we talk about it all the time, but another great athlete that became an actor. And again, we tie Hollywood into sports because it's synonymous, and we want to give homage to the great actors and athletes out there as well. Now, a lightning rod of an athlete, but no one can doubt how great he was on the field, irrespective of what happened off the field, is O.J. Simpson. The great O.J. Simpson, as an athlete, he played in the movie Roots, produced by Alex Haley, which talked about slavery and how people got through slavery. And he also played some great movies as well as some commercials, Big C.
Well, he played in Roots, Charlton. He played in that miniseries. He also played in the Naked Gun series with Leslie Nielsen. He also played in the Tower Infernal with a bunch of key actors. So he's crossed over into the barrier during those days and being able to make the transition from the football field behind the camera, to the acting screen.
Yeah.
And Jim Brown did that. He left his career early, Charlton. Jim Brown's final year in the NFL, he made $60,000.
Ouch.
But when he left the NFL and went into acting, and everyone was mad at Jim Brown because he left the NFL. Why? In the prime of your career.
Yeah.
He said, well, I'm also in the prime of my acting career.
Yeah.
And I can make $30,000 more in 3 months of acting than what I made in 6 months of football. So it was a no-brainer for Jim Brown. It showed his intelligence and lack of intelligence from the media because they said, well, you should get beat up for our joy.
Right.
And to make our lives easy. He said, no, I have to look at longevity. And even today, Charlton, Jim Brown has had to have both of his hips replaced. He's in his 70s now.
Yeah.
So he walks with a cane because he's had both of his hips replaced.
Yeah.
Now think about if he had played another 5 years, he may have had those hips replaced 20 years ago.
Yeah, I think Arnold Palmer, the great golfer, is going through some of the same issues. But even when we talk about O.J. Simpson, and this is irrespective of what's happened with the court issues and the things that happen in society, but I think right now one of the movies, a TV series that so many athletes and even soccer moms are into is called The People vs. O.J., and that's produced by the great John Travolta. I think Cuba Gooding Jr. is playing O.J. in that series. But that's how John Travolta, we talked about him in Pulp Fiction. I believe that was produced by Quentin Tarantino. He was in there with Sam Jackson, so many other great people, Bruce Willis. But one more thing that you brought up, Vin Rames, when you told Bruce Willis that you go down in the 4th round and you talked about that stinging sensation you feel. That's Pride. And forget about Pride. But that's another movie that parallels sports and acting, Big C.
Well, it has sports through it, Charlton. You know, that was one of the major sets in the movie when they talked about the sports, but talked about the boxing. They actually showed Bruce Willis in the ring.
Yeah.
But when you talk about a John Travolta, you know, you think about it. Here's a guy who has never won an Oscar.
Amazing.
And he's done some tremendous work. You know, you think about him starting off in Greece.
Yeah.
Where he was there with Greece, but he's done a lot more work in his older years. One of the greatest movies I enjoy watching him in is a movie called Swordfish.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a tremendous movie. It has Don Cheadle in there, Hugh Jackman. I mean, it's one of those thriller movies that takes you in and out of plot. Halle Berry's in the movie also.
Yeah, the beautiful Halle
John
Berry.
Travolta is a guy in Hollywood who has never gotten the respect that he deserves. He reminds you of an African-American athlete looking for something, and he doesn't get it, even though he's a great performer.
Well, when you also think about sports in Hollywood and how it intertwines with the Charlton and Big C show, I think about some of the great athletes now. Now, maybe great's overused when it comes to acting, but I think about LeBron James. He actually made a movie last year, but I go back to Michael Jordan. He was also in Space Jam. And then another athlete, Big C, that was really not as dominant on the field, but he's become a great actor. That's Dwayne Johnson, The Rock. He was in the Fast and Furious series, also San Andreas. He's done a great job of transitioning.
He has a dozen of movies, you know, when you look at The Rock. I mean, he's been all over the place. When he was at the University of Miami, he was a backup defensive lineman. His dad was a notable wrestler back in the 70s, Rocky Johnson.
Yeah.
And his son went on wanting to be a football player, and he played with one of the great teams down at the University of Miami.
Yeah.
That had won a national championship.
And they've had many.
So he had the athleticism to play.
Yeah, and they've had many national championships down in Miami. And one more actor that has played so many great roles. We talked about Will Smith, how he boycotted the Oscars, but he should have won an Oscar for it when he played Ali. I thought that was a great expression of how Ali was. Ali had to go to prison because he wanted to stand for something. They threw him in jail, stripped him of his crown, won the heavyweight championship 3 times in a row, and Will Smith, to pay homage to him, I thought that was incredible, Big C.
Well, you look at the sports movies that he's been in. You know, he was in Concussion, the way he played Dr. Amalo, and when he played Ali, that was one of the more iconic roles in movie history. Because not only did he look like Ali, he sort of talked like Ali, and the gamut that he went from in that movie, Charlton, going from nobody to somebody to losing it all and having to gain it all back again. You know, he had to fight the United States government.
Yeah.
And that was an iconic time. When you think about it, there was a photograph of Ali back in the 60s. He was sitting in a room.
Yeah.
He was in there with Jim Brown, Lou Alcindor, and a couple of other players. This is while Lou Al was 17 years old before he became Kareem.
Yes.
So the group of guys who hung together back then for the same cause, civil rights cause, and that's where Ali was. He was a civil rights crusader.
Yes.
But people said he was anti-government. And he had made a statement. He said, no Viet Cong ever used the N-word against me, but I get it used here all the time at home against me.
Well, we know.
And they've never done anything bad to me, but you want me to kill them.
Isn't that amazing? And that's what a great athlete actually stood up for something. And I'm glad that Ali, I know he's dealing with some health issues now, but even his daughter, the great Layla Ali, is a boxer. And so I appreciate what he's meant to the world of sports and Hollywood. And one more thing I want to bring up, Big C, before we transition into a lightning rod of a story. This segment is also sponsored by BMW of Northern California. Go test drive the ultimate driving machine. You can drive the 1 Series. They have the 3 Series, the 4 Series, the 5, the 6, and the ultimate flagship, the 750 BMW. That's the one that I drive. Go see your Northern California BMW dealer. Tell them that Charlton and Big C sent you. Now, Big C, a lightning rod of a story is something that you brought to my attention over the years, but now I'm understanding it even more and more. Number 1 seed, Michigan State lost. Actually, they were a number 2 seed, but they lost to Middle Tennessee State. But that's a side story, because you have some points that you were talking about that I think media needs to pay attention to when we talk about compensation, how only one person has talked about it outside of the Charlton Big C show. What are your thoughts on compensation with athletes, this free money grab that the NCAA has going on right now?
Well, Charlton, the NCAA does not want to be realistic about the amount of money that they're making. When you look at these student athletes, There's a 3-week.
Did you say student athletes or semi-pro athletes?
Well, it all depends on where you're getting paid at. You're getting paid behind the building and you're getting paid at the front desk.
Exactly.
And when you look at these, they so-called student athletes.
Yes.
Now, how is a player, Charlton, going to be on the road for 3.5 weeks during the NCAA tournament? And you're going to call him a student athlete?
Yes.
He doesn't have the time to go to class, Charlton. He is traveling. He is practicing. He's playing in cities where he does not live. Other students are in school, Charlton.
Yeah.
And you talk about keeping up an academic standard. And they said, well, they got tutors on the road, all right?
Yes.
So you bring these tutors on the road. Do the players have time to do the work, or are the tutors doing the work for them? But when we look at the NCAA, I think it would not be bad if the NCAA and professional sports such as football and basketball took a page from Major League Baseball. They've always seemed to have done it right, Charlton, where you can draft a player and he can still go to college. You have this player under contract. Let him go to college, get an education. You're using the colleges, Charlton, already as a farm system, okay?
Yeah.
So why not let this player go to college, utilize the money that you use as a signing bonus with him, so he doesn't have to accept a scholarship, but he's being paid by the organization to develop. So many of these players, Charlton, who leave after the one and done and don't get drafted or get cut, what are their options? But if they had an incentive, Charlton, to stay in college 3, 4, 5 years, then they would get something out of Charlton. The last senior player that was drafted by the NBA was 19 years ago.
19 years ago?
19 years ago. So the freshmen in college right now were just being born when the last senior was drafted #1 overall. That was Kenyon Martin, a power forward out of University of Cincinnati. Was the last senior player in college to be drafted #1 overall 19 years ago. Now, that's too far of a span to have mature players coming out. So they wonder why the state of the NBA is becoming what it is, Charlton. With all these disgruntled, non-respectable players. You're drafting a bunch of kids and telling them to act like men.
Well, I think you brought up a point also. I think the great Pat Riley, he was part of one of the teams when they started this pre-integration. And I know as an African-American male with a family, I look at how sports has done tremendous things for my life, even going back to punt, pass, and kick, which is a great organization. It gets kids involved in something positive.
I was too old when punt, pass, and kick came along.
Okay, that's for the younger generation. But I do understand, but how Little League Baseball, punt, pass, and kick, those things meant something, but they were oftentimes sponsored by a local business person. And now you get into the high school ranks, and I love the high school. I used to do some work with what's called Max Preps, where they covered all the high school kids, and also Cal High Sports. But Pat Riley was part of the integration part of this basketball, where they started allowing more African Americans to play. He's going on to do great things, but not everybody has that opportunity. And I heard Charles Barkley, and then also Kenny the Jet Smith and Clark Kellogg. I love the work that he does covering NCAA basketball. But
Clark
maybe
Kellogg is the greatest voice for college basketball.
Oh, he's excellent. Clark Kellogg is absolutely excellent. However, they don't really talk about, I mean, these guys are millionaires. And so maybe it's not even their job to do it. But we can do it. Why not talk about the exploitation of the black athlete? It goes back to when Pat Riley was part of a team that actually played a lot of black players. But there's really, I know they have to keep a job, but you got to stand for something. And I would love to see people in our position, Big C, at least speak out about the financial inequality of the young athlete. About 75% of the people in March Madness are African Americans.
Well, Charlton, they are creating millions, even billions of dollars for these white institutions. I mean, because you see no historical African-American schools in the NCAA tournament. They're just basically not allowed to play. And if they got into anything, it would be the NIT, which no one is interested tournament. So to not be able to bring the historical black colleges into the NCAA tournament is an injustice. There should at least be a grandfather position for at least 2 of those schools, Charlton. Allow them to be able to get some of the money, be rewarded with some of the wealth of the NCAA tournament. But that just shows the separation in society. We're not going to let the black colleges in. When you look at the bowl game series, Charlton, on national television, there's no historical black colleges that can qualify for any of the bowls. And there's some Division I historical black colleges. But it's almost like they've been ostracized. Just like on television, If you don't talk about it, then no one really will pay attention to it. And when you have people that can be spokespersons, Charlton, to say, hey, there's an inequality, injustice that has to be done, and we should try to right that. It doesn't matter to me because these guys that are sitting there, this is their voice.
Right.
I'm rich.
Right.
So it doesn't bother me. I'm rich. I got mine. So everybody else has to have an opportunity to get theirs. But how do they get that opportunity when there's only 3 positions open and they're already covered by 3 blacks? So you would have to become unemployed for them to get one.
Well, and I agree with you very much. I remember one time for the 2000 Olympic track and field trial in Sacramento, California, I was invited there by Lewis Johnson to sit in the press box, and Tom Hammond was doing the play-by-play, or he was announcing the Olympic trials, and they had Carl Lewis. I'll never forget Carl Lewis, the Olympic champion from 1984. He was in the press box, and he was pounding on the ceiling as they were running one of the races. Now, I remember Hammond saying, calm down with his hands. He was gesturing to Carl Lewis. But Carl Lewis was saying, hey, I'm just wanting to see this guy get his money. And I forgot the name of the runner. I think it was Calvin Johnson with the gold shoes back in the day.
Yes, the 400-meter run and the 200 runner. Yeah,
and so great athletes. But I remember Tom Hammond, a great broadcaster, love his work.
Notre Dame football.
Notre Dame football. Notre Dame has a football team. I thought they had a network. But Notre Dame does everything right, so congratulations to them. But when we think about people like Jim Nantz, a great announcer, we think about Tom Hammond, we think about some of the great people that we've seen and known over the years. You know many of these guys as well as I do. Until they start speaking about it, you're not going to hear much about it. And I think that's something that's so unfortunate. But I don't know what the answer is other than to get some attorneys to come to the table and say, we have to focus on compensation for these players, Big C.
Well, Charlton, look at it this way. We're going to be down to the Sweet 16 in a week, okay?
Yeah.
What would happen if all the players in the Sweet 16 would say, hey, we're not going to play unless we get paid? Think about it. What's going to happen? You got these arenas, you got these broadcast teams all sitting around. Would they blast the players? Would they say that the players are wrong?
Wow.
Because they're obligated to play because these people have paid all this money, so they need to go out there and perform? What if all the players in the NFL, and they've done it, boycotted?
Yeah, they have.
When the NFL players are boycotted, all of a sudden the league goes on a standstill and everybody's out scrambling trying to get so-called scam players. The NBA has the right to do the same thing. Major League Baseball is striking.
Yeah.
So players have stricken on the professional level to improve their income status.
Yes.
So why can't the college player do it, Charles? It's not like you have hundreds of other players that you can replace them by in a heartbeat to go out there and field the team. That's the one thing I would like to see one day, is because of the inequality and the teams are not paying the players, the NCAA is not playing, all of a sudden boycott all the bowl games during New Year's time one year, boycott the NCAA tournament, and see what actions would the NCAA take as far as compensating players once they start losing a couple of $1 billion, Charles.
Well, when you talk about compensating players, a lot of people think that's a sinister thing, but we talked about these great announcers that are announcing basketball games all around the country, and ironically, when we talk about broadcasters, ESPN commentators will not be on site for the first and second round games of the women's NCAA tournament that's hosted in Maryland and Mississippi State Friday through Monday, and the network confirmed that ESPN has been using remote productions more often in the last few seasons, and that's the first time ESPN has done so for the tournament. And I don't know what that has to do with a lot of things that we talk about, but we know it's money involved. Now, they have so much money, and I love listening to SportsCenter and the great announcers that work there, but they're pulling back from covering women's sports, and the women are the ones that tend to go on and graduate. And another thing, go ahead, Big C, your thoughts on that?
Well, when you look at the women, as you talk about from a graduation standpoint, also the purity of the game.
Yeah.
They go out and play fundamental basketball, such as John Wooden taught, Dean Smith taught. They taught the fundamentals of the game. You look at John Thompson. He taught the fundamentals of the game.
Yeah.
Jim Boeheim at Syracuse.
Yes.
They teach the fundamentals of the game on the men's perspective. And when you look at the women's game, I mean, it's the purity of the game. And I remember several years ago when the University of Rutgers won the national championship, and Don Imus went out and used expletives against the female team.
Yeah, the nappy-headed statement.
The nappy-head H's.
Yeah.
And was able to keep his job, Charles. They suspended him for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
But they put Don Imus back on the air after using all these racial slurs and denigrating statements against a female college basketball team. Now, think if that had been a black commentator or black anything
like
on
a Jim
television
Hill
or radio, make that statement. Say if
Jim
the
Hill.
guy that's, Hill, or even the one that Gumble.
Yeah.
Say if that had been Gumble.
Greg Gumbel. Yeah, Greg Gumbel.
Yeah. So, what would have been the outlash and cry across the country? But you had a white announcer on a show calling female college basketball players streetwalkers. That's basically what he called them on air. And it was okay. And he worked for CBS, Charlton. He worked for the CBS radio network.
Yeah.
And got away with it with a couple weeks suspension.
Well, I'm not surprised, Big C. And another lightning rod topic we're going to talk about next. And this segment is sponsored by your Ford dealerships of Northern California. Go down and test drive the Ford F-150. Their cars are built Ford tough. The F-150 is safe, reliable, dependable. Tell them that Charlton and Big C sent you. And we talk about lightning rod, Big C. And I know sometimes I disagree with you on certain things. I don't think that race is so much a part of things, but maybe I'm a bit naive. And when I think about that,
you're young. That's okay.
I'm still.
You never wore a pair of Chuck Taylor sneakers or PF Flyers. Okay.
Okay. For the young people, but this is a serious topic. The NFL, Brock Osweiler, the quarterback that played it back up at Denver, offered $72 million to go down to Texas. I think John Elway let him get away because he was caught on camera pushing a woman twice. Osweiler's 6'7". The woman's about 5'3". Pushed her twice. They talked about it for maybe 5 minutes, involving all the networks. Now, last night, Matt Barnes for the Memphis Grizzlies, he went after a player, I think John Henson, for the Milwaukee Bucks. And they made such a big deal about a man attacking another man. Well, maybe he saw the videotape when Osweiler pushed this woman and nothing happened. Another thing that's egregious, Big C, and I want to get your comments on it. The NFL, I know we can tie both together, but the NFL, they are considering more rule changes. Now, the unsportsmanlike conduct penalties that could lead to expulsion, they're throwing a punch at someone could be cause for you being kicked out of the game or kicking at an opponent. Dominican Sue's done that many times. Now, get this, using abrasive or threatening language or even gestures or baiting or taunting. We know what happened with New York and Carolina last year when they had their issues. Well, is Osweiler an NFL football player, Big C?
Well, he's trying to be an NFL football player, Charlton. He's been benched, so he's not a bona fide NFL player, but he wears the uniform. Yes. He wears the shield. But he gets a pass on doing negative action, Charlton. And that's become appalling, as we spoke about. You've had these white quarterbacks that get passes doing egregious acts off the field. Yeah. But if you're an African-American player, then you're looking at suspension, expulsion from the league, if you commit one of these similar acts. So, the commissioner, I'm trying to understand his thinking as far as how he handles these situations, but he hasn't done a great job of it. The commissioner is still focused on Tom Brady from a year and a half ago.
Deflating football.
Over a football. Tom Brady didn't kick anybody.
Right.
He didn't punch anybody. He didn't push anybody down. He didn't force a woman into a bathroom with his bodyguard standing outside, not letting her out or letting anybody in to help her. Right. Tom Brady didn't do that. There was a football scenario where Tom Brady didn't have access to the football with the needle. Right. So whoever did whatever egregious act they want to call it to this football, Tom Brady didn't have any physical action with it, only in the game. So this was happening beyond Tom Brady, but the commissioner is so focused on him is that he's letting these other quarterbacks who commit these criminal and heinous acts, the commissioner said it's okay. Well, we talked about Colin Kaepernick in Miami a couple of years ago. That wasn't even involved in an alleged incident, but the media beat him up for over a month. But the white quarterback said, hey, it's just boys being boys. Well, I think there was something that happened with a player at the University of Illinois that just had some type of incident, and that was all over the paper as well. And something that happened with the University of Cal Berkeley, they had some coaches in a similar situation where they were accused, just of being accused of something and being, taken away from the team. But Osweiler,
Yeah, well, that's a nice way of saying you have let go. But what is your thought? You've been in media for 40 years. You know the ins and outs of things. You've known players. You've known coaches. One more thing about Osweiler, and this is for all the people in media, people that have a talking voice like myself. I'll never forget, and I'm guilty of this. 1996, I was at the Oakland Coliseum. Now, I won't mention the all-pro player, but this was after a game. Okay, a lightning rod conversation, because he was outside of the locker room in the parking lot. There was myself and several other media people that was watching this guy, about 6'5", 300 pounds, just yelling at a woman, being abusive to the woman. I never saw him touch her, but he yelled and screamed at her so loud you would thought he was talking to another player. Nothing happened to him. I felt ashamed because I didn't say something along with the other people. I didn't want to lose my press credential. Is that what's going on in media now, that people know this guy's done this? They know they talked about $75 million, but no recourse, no even acknowledgement of it outside of 5 minutes, Big C.
Well, Charlton, there's been many situations like that. I recall Wayne Boggs years ago. He was a third baseman for the Boston Red Sox, where he had gotten into this incident with his girlfriend, his mistress, because he was married and had a family, but he had this traveling mistress that went on all the road games.
That happens in sports? I thought that was just politics, Big Z.
You got a side piece, whatever you want to call it. They had gotten into an altercation, so she went to Playboy to sell this story about what had gone on. Yeah. And so, it was okay. Wayne Boggs, it was like water over a duck. It just rolled off his back. Yeah. But he got away with it because he was with the Red Sox. He was Wade Boggs. He was a notable white player on the East Coast. And the media just tried to get away with it. They said, well, it's an angry ex-girlfriend. That doesn't make any difference. What happened to Tiger Woods, Charlton?
Yeah, for being hit.
He had a girlfriend outside of his marriage. Yeah. He lost all his sponsorship. He couldn't even play golf with the media horde behind him. But Wade Boggs was an iconic baseball player at the time, and it was a pass for him from the white media, Charlton.
But Tiger Woods is the only golfer in the history of the world to have girlfriends, right? I mean, it's never happened.
The only athlete in the history of the world.
Okay, and politician too, okay? But what's egregious about the NFL here, and Roger Goodell and his $44 million in the next 5 minutes, Big C, the NFL, after the Ray Rice incident and Greg Hardy, and I'm so proponent, no hitting women, period, no exception for it. And even when we have female commentators coming on television saying, well, he was trying to defend his wife. If you do, you step in the middle of someone. You don't have a right to push anyone. The NFL actually made a commercial, and they had several famous players. They were actually on TV crying. It was
during the playoffs, Charlton. They had players, they had actresses, they had actors. Just say no, you can't do it. It's not allowed. It's not acceptable. They were all on TV saying this. This was paid for by the NFL, Charlton. Yeah. They put millions of dollars into this advertising campaign to advocate no violence against women.
Yeah, and no violence means... Yeah.
The commissioner, Charlton, has turned his back on that commercial. It was almost like he was lying. He said, if I throw this out there, then they will believe that I don't condone this. Yeah. But Osweiler proved that he does condone it, Charlton.
And the fact that it was on tape is even more egregious. And I want to say this because I know, and I have known women who have been part of domestic violence. They've been part of being intimidated and threatened. And it's ironic that the league is trying to implement rules that will stop it from happening to other players. We know Latrell Sprewell, when he choked P.J. Carlesimo, they kicked him out of the league. He lost millions of dollars.
22-game suspension, Charlton, that year. When he choked P.J. Carlesimo, when they were with the Warriors at the time, and he choked him out. Yep. He got a 22-game suspension.
Yeah.
But, you look at this, it all depends on the complexion of somebody action that a league is going to take.
And see, I don't want to believe that because I just don't want to believe that, but I keep seeing how...
Charlton, you don't want to believe that. What color was Ray Rice?
African-American.
Okay, what color is Greg Hardy?
African-American.
What color was Adrian Peterson?
African-American.
What color is Brock Osweiler?
Caucasian.
Okay, and we got two other quarterbacks on alleged incidents, one at the University of Tennessee. What color was he?
Caucasian.
And we have the quarterback that was at Lake Tahoe and in Georgia and Atlanta. What color was he?
Caucasian.
Damn, that's 3 for 3, isn't it? We got 3 blacks, 3 whites. We got 3 blacks that's been punished. We got 3 whites that weren't. I don't want to say it's racism, but damn, look at the color of things, Charlton.
Well, you know what? That is so powerful because the talking heads, people like myself and yourself, whether you're on ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, I've known so many of the great broadcasters over the years, from Pat Summerall to John Madden to Tom Hammond to even the great Howard Cosell.
Charlton, let me give you a great analogy here.
Yes.
Harold Reynolds was a baseball analyst for ESPN.
Yes.
Okay? 2 years ago.
Yes.
There was an alleged sexual misconduct where he made gestures toward a female staff member, okay?
Yeah.
He was fired. Now, I would think about a decade ago, there was this basketball commentator named Marv Albert.
Oh, yeah, the great Marv Albert.
In Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
That he was charged with sexual assault. There were bite marks and bruises and everything else, okay?
Right. Wow.
Where do you see Marv Albert today?
That is very poignant, Big C. That's very poignant.
NBA games. Now, you can be charged with rape and you cut a plea deal as a white analyst.
Yeah.
You keep your job. As a black, you're ostracized out of the industry. Marv Albert, one of the voices of the NBA, committed sexual assault, cut a plea deal, and still is broadcasting games. Is it acceptable in white society to commit a heinous act against a woman and it's okay? Yes, it is. It's been proven.
And that's documented too, Big C. I know it's documented, and I know it's lightning rod. So in the last 30 seconds of the program, for anyone who's dealing with any type of being threatened or intimidated by an athlete, we know Osweiler has gotten away with it so far because Goodell, obviously, is like a UFO. He really hadn't seen it. He got
away with it. Marv Albert got away with it. The two other quarterbacks got away with it. So it's a racial thing. I'm not going to lie about it. It is, Charlton.
And it's something to think about over the weekend as we see about 80% of the athletes in March madness of things. There's no compensation for these players, but you just open my eyes to some things that are uncomfortable, Big C. But just because it's uncomfortable doesn't mean you be quiet about it. And I'm telling you, it's already come to an end. I can't believe 30 minutes flies by so fast. And you can always find out more as we'll come to you next week. I want everyone to enjoy March Madness. I want everyone to enjoy having good times with family and friends. But protect the women in our lives also. Don't let them be harmed and let us sit around and watch football and basketball and baseball and think it's just guys being guys. And we're bringing more real talk. Big C, you really opened my eyes. This is Real Talk with Charlton and Big C. We'll bring it to you every day, Monday through Friday at 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We do it worldwide. Bienvenidos to our Latin American audience, and we'll catch you next week.